Hello and welcome to my view from the piano bench. We do this on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. here in my Joel Holt's Notes YouTube channel, in addition to Piano for My Friends on Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. On Wednesdays, I move the phone camera a little closer to the piano so that I don't have to feel like I'm shouting across the room. I can talk more conversationally to you. You don't see as much of the piano keyboard, but that's less relevant on Wednesdays. Thank you to those of you who support and encourage me through the links you'll find on the support page of my website. That's really significant and important. So thank you very much. If you haven't looked at that, you'll find that link in the video description. And ask if you watch regularly if you would consider that. Regular ongoing support, such as the Patreon option, will elicit a monthly thank you email from me. And I guess I felt it goes without saying, but it probably doesn't, that if you don't subscribe and you do follow this channel, please do that. Like this video if you're inclined, comment if you're inclined. Those things are helpful. I never really considered myself, and still kind of don't, a YouTube content creator, but it might be moving that way, particularly with this weekly video. And I am getting good feedback after changing the format in recent months to just me being spontaneous. And I appreciate those of you who have fed back to me or contacted me. And that's just encouragement, and it fuels me and keeps me going. So I feel like I left out something, but I'm just going to keep going because I have no idea what it is. Maybe I'll remember. Each of these Wednesday videos has a topic, kind of a theme that I launch on. I don't pre-plan anymore. I don't write notes. I just let it go where it takes me. And it may, in the end, have little to do with the direct nature of the theme and maybe some tangent where it takes me off to. This one might be a little different. It might be unique, or I don't know. And I believe I'm going to title this, let's see if this matches what I actually put in the description, which will be, of course, after recording this. The phrase that, the phrase that explains everything. I was going back and forth between the phrase that says everything and the phrase that explains everything. It'll be one of those two titles. And by phrase, I mean musical sentence or musical phrase, not a language phrase, although they are analogous. And just for the sake of simplicity in teaching, I'll compare a musical phrase to a spoken or written sentence. And they say something, hopefully, and they make sense when they do, and they're part of a larger context. And this particular very short phrase is very famous. I was watching a video on the Tone-Based platform, and I'm going to start recommending them often. It's really amazing what they've done and continue to do, and they're still kind of just growing it out. It's a subscription platform for musicians. They have it for piano, guitar, and violin. Of course, I'm on the piano platform, and they have a lot of open content. It's not subscription on their YouTube channel, and I would check it out. And this was a particular live stream with somebody who was an expert on Bach. And the moderator asked him, what first got you interested in Bach? And he said, when I first heard the Toccata and Fugue in D minor when I was 10 years old. And that would be this theme. And it goes on from there. I don't feel like I'm playing it to do it justice, but I probably would never feel that way without a big pipe organ to play it on. Parenthetically or tangentially, because of kind of the unique circumstances of me being a piano major in college, without going into that, I was able to switch over to organ for the last 3 semesters. They had a nice pipe organ where I went to college, and an organ teacher that was very helpful. And one of the reasons I took that option was by that time I was being a church organist, and I kind of picked it up by myself. And I could use all the help I could get, and it was very helpful. And the reason that comes to mind is not just because you play that on the organ, which of course I did, uh, but I remember what the teacher, Dennis Elwell, said about it. He said, "Don't tell me that Bach isn't romantic or expressive." Right? What's more expressive than that, he asked me. And he's not wrong. Now, that gets into the whole weeds of interpretation of style periods, which is not my intention. Speaking of intention, this weekly video is hopefully threading the needle that non-musicians and musicians both can get something out of it, and that's what I seek to do. So I'm calling this the phrase that explains everything or the phrase that says everything. Now I can't make up my mind, so I'm going to say both. And it struck me when the person doing the live stream, doing the lecture, played that little phrase and said that's what drew him to Bach. All of a sudden, all that I've ever said in terms of trying to organize the concept and pass it along to students about tension and resolution is encapsulated right there. So this is going to be like a tension release launch for me, or not launch like start, but launch like, get my mouth going and launch on the subject. And I've long contended with students, and then let me put a parenthesis here, back in the early days, when I first started, because I had a driver's license and I could get the gigs, I always used that line. My career as a musician started when I was 17, when I had a driver's license and could get the gigs on my own. But actually, probably more importantly, at the time, and maybe even in general, was the fact that since I was still living at home with my parents, I really didn't have a place to teach. And as soon as I got my driver's license, I could pick up students. It's very easy to pick up students, probably now too, but then for sure. And of course, back in the 70s, there was a lot more interest in studying piano than there is today. So you just put an ad in the paper, piano lessons, come to your home, bang. It was easy to fill up the schedule. And in teaching, you really learn a lot. You become a student, in a way, a student of yourself, or you become your own teacher. Through the years, things would come back to me that I would say in lessons, and a lot of times it was just intuitively directed or guided based on trying to get a particular point across, or the unique perspective of the student that I was trying to match or make the light bulb go on. And I quickly began to see all of music in terms of managing tension and release. And when you talk about basic music theory, you can boil it down to that. And yes, I'm saying, and you can hear where that point of highest tension and release is there. Very simple concept, very simple phrase, except anything that will ever happen in music or in life or in anything is contained right there. So what I began to see early on in teaching was that this is something best understood as analogous to life. Because what does music do but convey human emotion, human expression, human stories, right? Now, if we don't have specific lyrics to music, then that story, if it is a specific story, can be written by the listener, right? And it doesn't have to, mean the same thing. Even if the song has lyrics, it doesn't have to mean the same thing. And what drives things forward. What drives them forward is in the order of things as they happen, there gets to a point of sort of critical mass, or in this case, I would say highest tension. And then when you get there, you have to resolve it. And then you look at that phrase, you look at that little movement, things going on to create the tension, resolution of tension. And if you really think about it, that's everywhere and everything. And what I would say to young students is, how often would you hand in your homework if your homework were never due? Right? So the due date of an assignment motivates you to start working on it, hopefully if you're disciplined, if you're mature, and you have this progression of activity that gets you to the point. And then if you get all the way to the point of it being due, it's the night before and you're still not done, you are entirely focused at that point on resolving the tension. And the resolution is like that. But working up to the point of resolution can be quick, or it can be a long period of time. I can, without naming it what it is, I can think of a circumstance in my life that went on for decades. That was of just a slow boil over a long time. But it finally necessitated resolution, right? And now, that part leading up to this is a very short traveling place to get here. What else would I say? So if you get up in the morning and you decide to skip breakfast, at a certain point, 11, 10, 9, noon, something, you really start feeling it and you really start getting grouchy, right? And you're going to get continually grouchy until you eat something. And when you eat something, you're instantly okay again. And that, again, would be the idea of increasing tension over time, right? Getting to the point of requiring something in order to resolve it. And that movement, tension release, continual tension release, propels everything. And in music, you express it not just in the harmony, but in articulation, in volume, in crescendos, decrescendos, everything. But in terms of music theory, that kind of becomes central to a lot of musicians' outlook, particularly jazz players and improvisers. It's really important for me to see it all in terms of tension release. Now, I'm reminded of when I did the All the Things You Are video 1 or 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Now, that will be a point of release. And this actually allows me to bring up that it was pointed out to me that I wasn't clear. I'm in the key of A flat. And this resolution actually is a kind of a modulation to C. So I don't want to get too far off the subject here, or go too far afield with it. But in a given key, diatonic things, you have the ability to have a basic, and then you work up to it. And actually, you could call that a release point, right? The reason it doesn't feel so much like a release point, although you could stop there, is it sequences, it goes on, which will prompt me to say that this analysis, there's a lot of subjectivity to it, and there is the technical side of it, and then there's the intuitive or the emotional or the feeling side of it. And I'm going to mention a name, and the person I'm going to name might be watching this, and that's Nate Grower, who I had as the guest, the fiddle player for David Bromberg for 15 years. I just learned that David Bromberg is retiring. So Nate's going to have some more time on his hands. And well, I have some plans for Nate. Yeah, Nate, but you know that. We've already talked. Or at least some desire to help him get himself out there because he's a fantastic musician. And we've had a few conversations over the several years that I've known him, and he recalled one that I was saying, and I had forgotten I said this, but he kind of called it a bit of a breakthrough moment for himself. He was describing to somebody that I had suggested him to look at the chords, and this is exactly related to this, in terms of feeling or feelings and different types of chords, like the chord of highest tension is a particular thing you feel when you hear that chord, as opposed to what you feel when you resolve. And then when you connect with that on an emotional level, then you can begin to express that in your playing. And one, just that somebody I said that to remembered it when I didn't remember saying it to Nate necessarily, really says something about him. But the fact that he really pondered on it and then said, and then I started to feel that. And now I get it. Yes. And so if you're really like involved in the process of making music, you're paying attention to those nuances that the listener is not analyzing in terms of those nuances or even the framework of tension release that we're putting on it. They're just going with the experience of it, and they're relating to it because that is the human experience. That's the experience of everything in nature, that things happen that eventually get to the point where it causes something to resolve or shift or move, right? There we go. But we go on. And then we do have a tonal center shift very briefly. And it's funny because now we're not in A flat anymore, but we still feel like we resolved because of how well it was constructed and how well it was set up. And I wasn't clear about that, and a friend pointed that out. So, see, I listen. Or at least I read your emails, right? And I misplayed that actually slightly. I played it a little different than the way I played it before. And hang on one second. I have to check one thing. My apologies. All right. My bad. So that illustrates that there is not one set way to get from here to there. In fact, the process of developing tension, it's like you need to go to the bathroom, but you can hold it for a while. But the longer you hold it, the more annoying it is, until it's so annoying that you have to deal with it, right? That was a gross illustration. But you could talk about, anything. A confrontation with somebody, that worked its way to that point. And sometimes the level of tension is kind of almost violent. And then it resolves how it resolves. And I just really felt that this is actually the perfect illustration of it, because it just brings it into focus really quickly. It's not drawn out. So you start somewhere, okay? But very quickly, it's like you hit a wall, right? And once you hit the wall, what can you do? You know, you're like, okay, finally. Right? And there are a few ways to analyze this. There are a few ways of emphasis. And the thing that I would always emphasize in the past, and the thing that theoretically is well, I can't say that necessarily. The thing that's typically understood as today is that the 5 chord, whether it's resolved into major or minor, the dominant 7th chord that's inherently tense resolves. But on a melodic level, the resolution, at least in the traditional sense, is what we call a half step. It's the closest note and there's more to it than that, because this is a context. And this happens within a context. But inside that context, you get to this point and when you can allow music, or the music is it sufficiently reaches you that it takes you somewhere and you take the ride with it, the manipulation of tension and release allows that ride to happen. And I would say it is deliberate tension and release, even if that is deliberately because you intuitively do it, not that you necessarily decide. Because the other way to travel is just to meander. Was there anything wrong with that? No. Meandering is a part of our existence too. You know, Lord knows, I meander all the time. My little joke is, but it's not entirely a joke, and I think my kids would say, amen, Dad, that I'm going to be a horrible nursing home patient because I'm going to be somebody who randomly makes noises and just as a wanderer, wanders the halls all the time. Hopefully it never comes to that, but... And as soon as you hit this note, in some form or another, you're going to resolve. Now, what I just kind of did without thinking about it will allow me to say resolution is not fixed. Resolution can take different forms. Some resolutions just in daily experience are less than optimal. Some resolutions are not clear what they're going to be until they happen. But they're going to happen. So what Bach wrote, which I'm calling like the cleanest, perfect example, just a microcosm of the idea of tension release. Now, whatever I did, I kind of like frillied, semi-meandered my way from that. But once I was here, it compelled me to do the next thing in the context of resolving that tension in some way. Now, you can resolve the tension to another tension, right? And that certainly can happen in life, you know? You fix one problem, but then you discover you painted yourself into a corner, and now you have another problem. And then you fix that problem. And as annoying as problems are, solving problems actually gets things done, and it's a good thing. And my thoughts these days, in recent years, have really come to emphasize that whatever the circumstance is, if it appears to be bad, undesirable, a problem, it is because it is an often out of necessity seen outside of the larger context. And you go back to the biblical directive of be grateful in all things. That's a very freeing thing, because it's those moments of tension that either aren't resolving properly, aren't resolving at all, which means they take a while to resolve, or resolve to an unpleasant place that we see as bad. Being grateful opens us up to be able to appreciate that it's part of a bigger story. It's always part of a bigger story. And the blessing down the road would not happen, whatever that blessing is, to whomever it is, without the pain that happens in the moment. And of course, I don't even like to talk like that. But who likes discomfort and pain? But it's a part of the process. And you could argue there were a couple of resolution points in there, right? And when you listen to music, you know, and I didn't count, but I'd say easily you can identify, depending on how you want to categorize them, between 4 and 10, somewhere in there, half a dozen for sure. You could say more points of tension and release. And what I would define as the resolution of something is when you can walk away from it, in life or in music. Now, in the larger context of something, you won't walk away if it's a bigger thing. But within that place you're traveling, you know, like in the larger context of your day, just because you skip breakfast and you finally eat something at 11:30 to avoid biting the head off of your coworker, that doesn't mean your day's over, right? So, you know, there's resolutions that take place all the time, you know, and then at the end of a piece of music, there's a final resolution. And we can equate that to, you know, the end of a project, the end of a day, the end of our lives, right? Whatever. But this phrase is not dissimilar to the Bach phrase. We say something, and now I'm not going to say that this requires resolution, but it does suggest that we're going to move. We get here based on the notes that are there, as opposed to these notes, which are more thick than they are tense. This is more tense. Can you hear that? And now, again, what I was apparently saying to Nate years ago. This is one feeling. This is another feeling. And you hear that dissonance. That's another feeling, right? What's the melody now? I forgot already. Yes. Right? So in the first 3 notes of Misty, and because of that, because there's actually a little story within a story, lots of stories within stories, really in stories, that's just its own little statement. which is why if nothing's stopping me, I'll go into time after I do that. I was reasonably pleased with that. And you know, if you're kind of hip at this point, if you're getting what I'm saying, and you can hear the different nature of this sound, moving to this sound that I'm playing slightly differently, but a different nature, and that making sense to you, go back and play back what I played, and see if you can hear that same sense of feeling in other places. Sometimes happening very quickly, you know, and none of that was dragging out for long because it wasn't that long a phrase. But I'm inclined to play this rubato. Now, of course, if you're playing it in time, look at me. And even though you might want to play it rubato, if you play the whole tune and go back to the top, that happens in one beat. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So you really have to slow, and I guess that's why I like slowing it down. In fact, that's exactly why I like slowing it down. Because I want to milk that. Right? And if I were like the big chops kind of player, which I'm not, or the big, you know, crazy harmony, thick tension, all altered sub, blah, 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 which I'm not, then I could milk both of those places. I could travel around, and then I could do all kinds of other things, and I could, or maybe I could, wow. I could suspend the resolution. And like, did I get your attention? Look at. Woo. And so what really happens in the harmony scheme, or just in life, is that, you know, resolutions are not clear cut. At least, you know, there's not one way to do it. And sometimes the suspense leaves you hanging, right? And then, now, I can't really go on. I could, but you really, you want to hear that before I go on. Now, notice how I got here and I slowed down and I played this softer, and now I just feel so relaxed, like a pot of melted butter. Oh, that feels so, I mean, it really does. That feels good. It feels good not just because it's a pleasant sound, but because I got there. You know, the ride, the ski lift came down and it dropped me off and it went away, and I'm just like, right? Am I ridiculous? Of course I am. I won't go on, I'll stop there now. It's obvious point of resolution. Now, resolution doesn't mean that the texture is thin. Resolution doesn't mean it's not complicated. Resolution just means you don't have to do something else in order to be able to take a deep breath. You know, circumstantially. Whatever I do to get here, whatever I play, yeah. play much more than just a triad. Because I'm not playing those like if I were playing that, then you want to hear me go someplace else that the melody doesn't support. So here's a conceptual thing. And this is why I love playing tunes. And that's why I'm absolutely the most comfortable. Because the melody of the tune will guide you. There is not just one way to play it harmonically. There's the way the composer wrote it, which is always good to know, or often is. But the mid-sentence, I lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh. I did good though, didn't I? Up to that point. Oh yeah. I couldn't really play this chord when I got there because the melody doesn't support resolving that. That was my point. So for me, and I've said this before in different ways, all the harmony is actually very explicit in this melody. And if I played the melody without any chords, it's very thin texture, but within a thin texture, you can still feel. And of course, I'm bringing that up by how I'm phrasing it. I'm not resolved, really, kind of not. And then what the harmony does is makes that implicit tension and release explicit. See? Whew. I'm moving again. See, when I got to the end, I could have just played this chord, but I did that little turnaround-ish, circle of fifths-ish thing. I just kept the tension release going and ended it here. So let's stop. I think that was a decent analysis of that phrase. So I'll go to something that some of you have heard me say before, but maybe into a little more detail. So I acquired, as a child, an actual piano when I was 7. It was the first real opportunity for that because I was a military brat and we moved to southern New Jersey when I was 7, and that's the 6th place I had lived. And I don't think that my dad knew, there's no way he could have known, that he would remain stationed as supply chief at the Marine Corps Supply Activity in Philadelphia, which is why we moved, for 9 years before he was finally retired on the disability that he was always trying not to have to retire over, but he finally was forced to. And I guess he knew that we were going to have some stability. He had just come back from Okinawa, so we'd been overseas. Family had been separated. I was living in Kentucky until he came back, and that's another thing. I ain't putting this on. This is like how I talk, except my voice was high and squeaky, and a neighbor across the street, she called me the hillbilly boy when we moved to Belmar, New Jersey. But anyhow, I digress. Really? So I got a spinet piano. My dad bought it from the woman across the street who was selling hers. I remember a couple guys pushing the piano across the street. and into our living room because I was, interested. And I had a toy piano and I was playing music on it. And my dad called the piano tuner out of the paper. He was at the time 78 years old, a German man, Mr. Schmidt, Alfred Schmidt, who lived in Audubon, New Jersey. And my dad figured that piano tuner would either give lessons or know somebody who did. And this piano tuner gave lessons. So he came back after he tuned the piano and started me. He was like a beginner teacher, but he could take you, decent ways. But it wasn't like a lot of the nuanced stuff I didn't really learn until later. And he was not equipped to teach me improvisation. And I had to find things out on my own because he really knew nothing. He encouraged me, but he knew nothing. And about improvisation. And I remember, when 7 is when I started playing the piano in an organized way because I had one. And I remember discovering the idea of tension and release when I was 8 years old. And how I look back on it now, whatever category or catalog in my head I put it in, whatever was on the file folder that marked it in my head, I'm not sure. What I would say now is 5-1. I found the 5 chord I discovered. And in the context of what I'm talking about now, what I discovered was tension and resolution. Or like you get here. Of course, I'm doing it in the key of C, but it happens in any key. That was the key of F. Now, that was in the key of B flat. That was in the key of E flat. That was in the key of A flat. And I milked that. I just would figure out things on my own. And I had a way. Right? And that's all this tension release. When I was 9 years old, I discovered the 4 chord. Now, 1, 4, 5. If you've heard about music and you're, maybe a musician casually or something, 1, 4, 5. And what I did when I discovered the 4 chord was I basically created the essence of that phrase. Having that chord, additional chord that wasn't the starting chord or the chord to require you to resolve it, allows you to travel around until and that gave me a lot more to do when I was 10 years old when I discovered on my own what we now call the circle of fifth string of secondary dominance. So, so if I'm in, key of C, right? 5-1. Tension, release. But what if I have my tension, I resolve it, but I resolve it in such a way that that resolution becomes another point of highest tension. It requires me to resolve it. But what if I resolve it? It's that note that does it. Okay. So now you can string those tension and resolutions along, and you can have bang, 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 bang if you want, like what I did in the turnaround for Misty. Instead of I keep going and it keeps making me go. Then I finally resolve again. Wait a minute, but I'm doing too much thinking. Now, inside of that, to this note, that movement of half steps, what we call chromatic movement, that was keeping the tension alive. And actually resolved 2 notes. I resolved 3 notes by half step. How about 4 notes by half step? So I have this, all of those creating tension, resolve 3 notes. This one to here, this one to here, this one to here. I think. I don't know what I did. No, I didn't do that at all. These 4 notes, 2, 3, 4, to these 4 notes. To these 4 notes. And not all of them were half steps, but I'm getting too much in the weeds. But you get the point that you change one note in the chord, and then you change the meaning of the chord, or the feeling that the chord gives you. All right, I'm going to shut up for a minute. Fancy at all in a jazz sense, but you travel with it, right? It doesn't have to be fancy. It can just be nice and simple. And again, this is not intended to be, because it isn't, a demonstration of like great advanced harmonic prowess. There are plenty of musicians around who are drawn to find those extra special, juicy, crunchy sounds and put them everywhere. And at a certain point, it becomes kind of like math. And you arrive at it, at least initially, through a cognitive exercise. Like, okay, this relationship to this, and you do this, and then that creates this, chord, right? And then at some point, in order to truly express it, it has to not be a cognitive exercise. It has to be an expressive exercise, at least for me. And when the thing gets all just big and giant like that, it remains cognitive for me. It's just, I want to hear melodies move. And just having a nice conversation with Paul Mediri today. And we were talking about that, and talking about the idea of what amounts to personal taste. And he was quick to say, I don't necessarily care for this. Doesn't mean this guy's not a great player. It's just not speaking to me. Right? And of course, as a musician, you really want to find out who you are and be the best you. Right? Or you want to be the best you at whatever you do. So let me play All the Things You Are. Say, although you could argue there's points of tension release, you can just consider this like a big travel. You know, you're at 9:30 in the morning. You know, you're at 10:30 in the morning. You're at noon, and now you're gonna finally have your fried egg and toast. I don't know. Or maybe just a Snickers bar, which means you're not really resolved at all because you're going to have a crash again right away. The beauty of a song like that is that it's not like Misty being more of a jazz tune, because All the Things You Are, you could say is a jazz tune. We've had this discussion. But your certain tunes invite lots of big fat tensions and everything. But for me, All the Things You Are is just really a nice traveling kind of tune that has its little points. Yeah, come on. Woo! See, they could hear. You hear it there, right? Anyway. See what it feels like? But of course we're not done. Because we settled up with that, and then we... Woo! Did there. But anyhow, so did that make sense? Tension and resolution. And that was just like, there it is. There's everything in 3 seconds or 4 seconds. Right? And everything else we do is an extrapolation of that. What? I just forgot what keys in. And I tried to resolve it in the wrong key. So that didn't work. Often this tune is played in C, and I will often play it, or at least start in B flat. And I wasn't thinking when I started to resolve it in C. thinking about what you're doing and then doing it, which when you're thinking, you're not feeling. And so you need to like step away from the thinking. Like, how do you really feel about that? No, don't play the scenarios out in your head. Don't think about what it could be. Don't even think about what it is. How do you feel about that? Where is that taking you? If you let completely go and you were following your heart, where would you go? That's an important question for life, right? It's a really important question for music. Especially if you want to communicate with people and you want to reach people. I reminded now of something I wrote down years ago, and I came across it recently. Make a decision with only your mind, and you may find yourself someday with a broken heart. Right? And yeah. See, this music is a profound place. Music is just profound. That's why we're all connected to it. And some of us are, practitioners of it, and some of us are, the audience or the recipients of it. Or it's like the doctor and the patient, right? And we all have our roles. Now, of course, I can make some quip about music therapy in this regard, but the music therapist part, as it came later, just really helped inform me, because it was not what I had planned to do or be, but it is a natural extension of what I do. And I'll joke about that. It's my music therapist, so I want you to lie down on this couch. I'm going to play some tunes for you, and you're going to reflect on what kind of hat your mother made you wear. And we're going to start there. But yeah, I hope that makes sense. All right, well, what did I do? I didn't resolve it. I kept the suspense. And then I resolved it. Finally, right? But I watched myself too, so let me sit back and... You're waiting. Woo! But then in the end, I broke my left hand away, because up until that point I was playing unison. Same thing in both hands. Now I'm going to break my left hand away. And I'm going to do half steps. In fact, you hear it's like a straight out dissonance. You have to keep moving or else it sounds awful. And it's funny, if you're moving, that actually sounds kind of cool, right? But if you stop, not only do you have unresolved tension, you have an ugly sound. Right? Notice how the ugly sound isn't ugly in a context. The context of course, I just didn't do it because I decided to do something else with my left hand. I cannot control my hands all the time, and that's good. So there. But you see how this gets me kind of animated and juiced. And I love being able to have my life live in this realm. And I love being able to share it with you. Speaking of sharing, and I don't ask this, and I need to start asking it. If you enjoy this particular video or any others, share it. It helps me. But don't share it just because it helps me. Share it because, someone might want to see this. I'll email it to them. Or I'll post it on Facebook and I'll say, whatever, at 24 minutes and change, he says something really stupid. Go there so you can laugh at him, or whatever. And in the land of YouTube videos, because I have some YouTube videos from before that nothing like viral. I'm not part of pop culture. I don't have millions of views of anything, and probably never will. But I have some videos with healthy amounts of views that have been out there, tunes that because people find them, or they've been shared or recommended, or the algorithms takes you there, and the video just being moved around helps that. So if this is helpful to you, pass it along. And thank you so much. This was kind of fun. Now, sometimes I don't think I make sense, and I listen to it, oh, I did. Today I feel like focus and it made sense. It probably is a rambling mess. You let me know. But thank you so much. See you soon.